Hey, this is Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. Let's talk about bus compression, specifically mixed bus compression. You may fall into one of two camps. Either you do use some sort of compression on your mix bus, and by mix bus I just mean your master fader, your main mix. Either you do use compression or you don't. And if you do use it, there's a chance you might have it set up in a way that is too aggressive and is too much and is hurting you. And if you don't use it, maybe you'd like a kind of a cheat sheet starting point of how to set it up, where to set it up, and then at least a starting point for you to move forward so you know you're not maybe hurting the mix, hopefully, and can start to dip your toe in the water of mix bus compression, because there's some cool benefits to doing it. So here in front of me, we've got a stereo mix of the same song. This is the same mix on two tracks. And on the first one, this is how I normally, this left compressor here, this is the SSL bus compressor from Waves. And this is generally how I have it set up. If you zoom in here, you can see I've got the slowest attack they'll allow me to have, which is 30 milliseconds. A quick release, 100 milliseconds. 2-to-1 ratio down here. And then I just set the threshold to where I'm getting just a few dB of gain or of gain reduction, and then use the makeup gain to make up for that so the volume stays roughly the same. And here's what that sounds like. You can watch it work here and kind of hear that in the mix.
September love.
So for me, I personally like to do more of a subtle compression of the whole bus, because it can really start to kind of, if you can easily go overboard. So I try to go subtle with a few dB where the needle's getting back close to zero most of the time. And you can hear I'll turn it off and then I'll turn it back on. So you can hear it's a subtle difference, but it tends to thicken up the low end a little bit. I'll start without the compressor on, and then you'll see me click it back on.
September love.
So as you can hear, the compressed signal is a tiny bit louder, partially because of the makeup gain, but it also just is a little thicker, just a little more kind of glue-ishness. That's what's nice about using compression on your master bus. And you can use an SSL, you can use your stock compressor and get similar effect. So you don't have to have an SSL. That's just what I've used forever, and I'm used to using it. Now, I want to show you something different. Here's the same mix with the exact same settings. Here's the compressor for this mix. And the only difference I made, literally the only difference, was adjusting the attack time from over here at 30 milliseconds down here to 0.1 millisecond, okay? Super fast attack time. Notice the difference. The volume's going to be different, but I wanted to just change that one setting and show you how differently it sounds. Here we go, take a listen.
September love.
With the threshold and everything else being the same, we've got upwards of 6 to 8 dB of compression happening just by changing the attack. Now that makes sense. We're shortening the amount of time the compressor gives before it starts attacking, so every little hit is crossing the threshold and is getting slammed down by the compressor. The thing about, I see a lot of people starting off their mixes and their mix bus with a really fast attack time, just because maybe that's just the default that came up when they pulled up the compressor, and then they wonder why their mixes lose a lot of punch. That's the reason. Now, if you bring the threshold up and get the same amount of gain reduction happening, it actually sounds pretty similar. But especially if you're mixing into the compressor and you start to turn things up and push the compressor a little bit harder, you'll find the punch just goes away, because there's no gateway, there's no opening there for those punchy things like kick drum and snare to punch through and to maintain their warmth and punch and presence if you have a super fast attack time. To be fair, let me increase the gain over here and balance out the volumes, and I'll switch back and forth between them. Again, the top one's the slow attack, the bottom one's fast attack. And listen to how much punchier the slower attack one sounds.
September love.
Did you notice that? It's almost like I want to reach for some sort of an EQ with that fast attack because it's squashing the punch in the low end and all the thick punchiness of the mix. It's squashing those transients down, and so I'm left mainly just hearing that mid-range of the guitars. So if that sounds like some of your mixes where you know the drums by themselves sound punchy, you know the bass sounds good, but then in the full context of the mix, things just seem to disappear and all you hear is kind of harsher upper mid-range or maybe some muddiness in the middle, you check your compressor if you're using one. If you're not using one, don't let this scare you off. Just, if anything, let it scare you off of going with a super fast attack time. Here's what I would suggest as a starting point. I'm not big on presets, but I would start like this. Set a compressor with a ratio of 2:1, release of 100 milliseconds, that's 0.1 seconds, attack of 30 milliseconds, and then set the threshold to where just a little bit of gain reduction is happening, and then increase the makeup gain by maybe 2 dB to compensate for that. And that's it. And just let that be your setting. If the compression gets way up here in the 4 to 6 range, maybe dial it back, unless it just sounds really good to you. Otherwise, dial it back, and now you know you'll be under control, but you'll get some of the benefits of using a compressor, and you won't end up with a mix that sounds like this, where the punch of the kick and snare just disappeared. You'll be able to get some good thickness out of the bus compressor without that, and you end up with this that sounds mucho better. Those drums are still there. I feel like I'm hearing really good sounding drums as opposed to, hey, where'd the drums go? Okay, that was a little more of a subtle thing. If you want to, I would encourage you to rewatch this video a couple times and pay attention to when I'm clicking on things and when it's switching. And really, if you can, listen in your studio, on your studio monitors or on nicer headphones so you can really understand and hear what I'm showing you, because it's a subtle, small thing, but it makes a huge difference and impact on the overall sound of your mix. Okay, thanks for listening and being a subscriber. Again, I'm Joe from HomeStudioCorner.com. See you next week.